friends. Today, welcome to Marriage Encounter. We're so happy to be with you again today. And we want to welcome all of our various audiences, those on Second Advent Radio. Welcome. Those on our Facebook page, we welcome you. We welcome you today to Marriage Encounter. And of course, our audience that will join us later, we welcome you to the YouTube stream as well. We're so happy that you could be on with us today and looking forward to an amazing discussion once again. Well, last week, it was Pastor Adams and myself, and today we are rejoined by our host, Dr. Carson Greene. Dr. Greene, we're so happy to have you back with us today. Trust that you're doing well. Some would say you're looking fairer. I wouldn't say fatter, but looking good. So we're really happy that you're on with us today. Say a few words to the folks.
Good day to all of our viewers and radio friends. Delighted to be back with you. Trust that you're doing well. And like we like to say here on Marriage Encounter, if your marriage is not seeing the best of days, you have tuned in to the right spot.
Amen. Amen. And Dr. Pastor Adams over there in Sugar City. Good to have you on with us again today. We had a great time, as we always do, last week. And tell us what's happening over on St. Kitts today.
Sure. Good morning. It's a very bright and sunny morning. I was rushing between two radios from the radio station to get back here. We were on the radio this morning with the evangelist. And Sugar City is dry, very dry. And we have started yesterday the hurricane season. We had national church service to ask God's guidance and protection as we begin the hurricane season. But like Dr. Greene rightly said, while we look for the tempests in the ocean, there can be relationships and marriages that are going through turbulent times. And this is the program to be at this morning.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. We're praying for rain all around. So we need rain here in Antigua also. As you more likely do on St. Kitts. Well, last week we were looking at, we continued our discussion on boundaries, of course. And we were looking at submitting really to the boundaries on our control, looking at how sometimes we, as one of the spouses, attempt to control our spouses. And we need to put a boundary on that. We need to determine that, us attempting to control our spouses is not a good thing. And so we're looking at submitting boundaries on our control. We looked, first of all, at that we ought to realize the cost of other control. And under that, we spoke to, how challenging it is when sometimes, because we pressure the other person, they will give us outward compliance, but internally, there's no change. Well, we're going to continue today. But before we do so, we're going to ask Dr. Greene to give us a word of prayer as we proceed this morning.
Well, let us bow our heads. Eternal Father and our God, we are so grateful for the opportunity and privilege to be able to share again a Marriage Encounter with our friends, and pray that you will guide this discussion, grant that the information presented will prove meaningful to build in some marriage and helping the relationships to get better. Take full control of us, we pray in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. So Dr. Greene, yes, as we mentioned last time, we were looking at the fact that, there's a spouse sometimes who truly loves their mate and really wants the person to grow. But sometimes in doing this, they control their spouse. And so we're saying that when a person comes to this realization or recognition, or it is brought to their attention, they need to place some boundaries on their behavior.
Yes, definitely. And it is important that our viewers and listeners understand that we are looking at a topic that calls for taking responsibility and having that desire to improve your relationship, so that if you really want your relationship to get better, you've got to begin to think about how you can be a better spouse. I think this is the general tenor of the situation here, Dr. Braithwaite.
Right.
And so it is important for us to ask our spouse to let us know how um, your attempt to control affairs is impacting him or her, as the case may be. Now this means that, again, you're going to have to, some people like to say, drink some humble pie. Admit that you have had it so right. This matter of control is a real challenge for some people. As we have been saying all along, we really like to be in the driver's seat. It's like saying, listen, honey, tell me, how has my driving been? My bad driving been?
Yeah, so true. We always want approval, even when we're not doing it right? Yeah, Pastor Adams, as we said last time, we looked at, we realizing the cost of other control. Today, we want to look at another area where we can ask our spouse to let them know how our control is affecting them. Can you share some thoughts in that arena?
Yes, and that is the proper and right thing to do, because I think at our last broadcast we did talk to the matter of empathy and putting yourself in the place of the other person to see how he or she would feel.
Right.
So that the reaction that you will see, maybe you will react the same way if it was the other way around. You see, and then because we are our individual selves, the acceptance that we have our individuality or differences must always be part of that equation. So it is so essential, it's so necessary for us to get that understanding and to see it from that perspective, right? We are different. We might have some common things, because when we deal with the success or marriage, when we look at the success quotient for marriage, we're talking about compatibility. Even though we might be compatible in many regards, but yet we still have differences in so many areas, And so while we have some things common, there must be room for the areas where we differ. What you may like, I do not like. What you may want, I do not want. So we have to leave room for these aspects as well in the relationship. I mean, I am a noisemaker. My wife doesn't like noise, so I have to control the volume in the house. And when she's out, I play the music as loud as I would want to play it. But when she's home, Pastor Adam Stanton, please turn on your music. You're too loud, And so we don't, we wouldn't always be similar in every regard. And I did think I made this statement. I'm going to make it again. Marriage is not about sameness, it's about oneness. And so the minute we accept that reality, that it's not about sameness, but oneness, we must come around to the acceptance that, yes, there are going to be individual differences, individual preferences, individual choices, decisions that we may not like, that we may not want. And but our spouses must be allowed that freedom. Yes.
All right, great. Yes, Dr. Greene, I saw you.
I've just been thinking, Dr. Braithwaite and Pastor Adams, to go back on the illustration, I do have some background noise on my location, so I trust it's not too disturbing. But just to go back to the illustration that Pastor Adams made there, if he's a noise maker and he likes perhaps to play his music at very low decibels without any regard for his wife, and he listens to this program now and recognizes that that is a form of control, and he goes in and goes home to his spouse and he says, honey, listen, I realize that I have been ignoring your feelings. How has my behavior been impacting you? I want to make a difference. Can you think about how significant that would be to your spouse? Just the thought of coming to the point where you can actually say it would, I think, be rather life-changing for the partner.
Absolutely. I think, Pastor Adams, it is really just an illustration, lest anybody leave. But the point that Dr. Greene is making is such an important point, because engage your spouse in and give them the opportunity to share with you, how your behavior, controlling behavior, has been impacting them, and so you may have recognized for some reason that there was some distancing between you and your spouse as a result of, but you may not have realized it was as a result of your behavior, that type of controlling behavior that says that sort of I do it my way. And if you don't like it, we say you lump it. And so now you get the opportunity, you give your spouse the opportunity to be involved. And when you hear your spouse speak, now you can develop some measure of empathy. You can feel compassion towards your spouse. And it now gives you an opportunity to better limit or to control your own behavior, recognizing that you're doing something that is, causing concern for your spouse and may, kind of make your spouse feel as though, hey, you are attempting to control me in this particular arena.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So as we continue, I mean, that's a beautiful area. But we can also look at, as we contemplate this discussion, experience your own helplessness to change your spouse. Experience your own helplessness to change your spouse. So notice in this, just as an overview, as you sometimes attempt to control, it's often an attempt to change their behavior. And we need to recognize that we really can't change anybody. And we've been saying this in different ways over and over again over the weeks and the months. And I think, as listeners, those of us who are listening, it's important to recognize and come to the conclusion that we cannot change. Dr. Greene, how can a person come to the point where they recognize they are helpless really to change their spouse?
Well, Doc, before I answer the question directly, I want to just suggest that there may be a difference between having a desire to see your spouse change and attempting to change your spouse. Because you may really want your spouse to change. If your spouse is misbehaving, if your spouse is inconsiderate, if your spouse is loud and disturbing to your peace, it's okay to want that change. But to attempt to change it or to change him or her is a different story altogether. And your question is really about the awareness that as an individual, I am incapable of changing my spouse. I think we're discussing something that is extremely important and very significant. The moment I get to the point where I can recognize, where I can give recognition to the reality that I am not capable of changing my spouse, I mean, that is a success for me right there, because that's the reality. I don't have the power to change my spouse. My spouse is going to change when my spouse decides to change. And it's important for us all in this marriage relationship to realize that.
Yes. Dr. Pastor Adams, yes. Let me hear your thoughts.
But while that is so, what if a conflict ensues because of that situation? And I thought about it. We need to know how to manage some situations that we cannot, when we cannot see the change as quickly and as readily as we want. And that has to do with how you manage yourself or how you react to the same thing that you really want your spouse to change. So you have to manage yourself and manage that process until you see the desired change that you will want to bring about. Because yes, as we are saying, that you really can't change the person. So are you going to make it a conflict situation day and night because your spouse might not be adjusting or making the change as fast as you want? You will have to know how to manage that situation and keep the peace. So I might not like what is happening now, but I still have to relate to you as a person. I still have to be civil. I still have to behave myself because we are in this emotional relationship together, right? So it called for me to manage myself and manage the situation while I wait to see the change that I want. Like I think I don't know if I wanted to say it last week, but the time ran out from us. To get people to change or to help in that process is not well, we discussed that before, is not an all-out attack on our assault on the person, but why not talk to the areas that we applaud, that we appreciate, that we like very much? When you begin to talk to those areas, then the person gets the kind of an affirmation, all these things, and that's just how the human mind is, and then, well, yes, they might be willing on their own accord to begin to make those other changes and those other adjustments that we may want to see. But we need to manage ourselves and manage the relationship, that we do not create a conflict habitual situation just because we're not getting the change or maybe, whatever we want to see as quickly as we would want.
Okay.
Some persons may struggle with managing the relationship and may think that this is in itself control. They may interpret that as meaning, let me control this situation.
Right.
And the earlier point, that when we get to the point where we recognize that we are living with somebody who we can't make do the right thing is important. And so Pastor Adams, your point about managing ourselves is an important point. When I realize that I am powerless to make my spouse do something, because if I try to, I may end up in an abusive situation.
Yes.
If I say you do this or else you will not get this, then that kind of control is having my spouse in a hostage situation, which is not good for relationship growth. Mm-hmm. So the better, the sooner rather I recognize that I'm powerless to change my spouse, I need to begin to think about, how am I going to live with this situation and make it work in a meaningful way? And that's the challenge of marriage.
We've been using the word powerless and I guess helpless kind of interchangeably. And I mean, for the purposes of this discussion, that understanding of helplessness, or in this context, powerlessness to some extent, it can be a very painful emotion when you recognize that, this person maybe from your perspective going down the wrong road, wrong path, but you cannot change that. And I don't know if people sort of really appreciate, that emotion is painful. Helplessness, you're in a position where you cannot do anything to change the person. And, again, as you've all shared very clearly, the ability to recognize that, to realize that you are helpless. The person will only change when they make a choice, when they choose to change, when they're ready to change. That is all within their purview. And critically here, Pastor Greene, Dr. Greene, you mentioned it, Pastor Adams sort of mentioned it as well. If you attempt to force that person, as we say in the Caribbean, sometimes manhandle, right? Mm-hmm. You may find yourself in a very challenging situation. Yes. And I go back to, the time when we spoke about that person who said that, their spouse cannot leave home in that dress. You can't physically go and take off the person's dress and put on another one. You're looking for, that would be quite disastrous. So that emotion, and I want to what I want to highlight here, being able to acknowledge as an individual, as you sit and listen to us today, being able to acknowledge that emotion, that painful emotion sometimes of helplessness. We feel it with our spouses, sometimes we feel it with our children, and that's just to broaden the discussion a little bit. But that emotion of helplessness can sometimes be quite challenging.
I want to be a little real here, Dr. Braithwaite, Pastor Adams. Let's say it's a situation where you are seeking to do what you consider to be the right thing, the ethical thing, the religious thing, the spiritual thing. You're a Christian and your spouse professes to be a Christian, but let's say your spouse is not attending church as regularly as you would like your spouse to, or your spouse is going to some places that you consider to be irreligious, not right for the Christian, and you're seeking to get your spouse to change that behavior. Come to church with me. Don't stay home on Sabbath mornings and watch television or something to that effect. And imagine a scenario where you are saying to your spouse, get up, get dressed, let's go to church. We need to leave at this time. Or your spouse wants to go to a particular show and you're saying, you're not leaving this house tonight to go there because that is not right. You can see the challenge there.
I don't want to cut you, but I'm just using some things that do happen. People, will plug out items, turn off electricity, hide the iron, those types of behaviors in an attempt to control. Go ahead, Doc. I just wanted to highlight some of those.
And I'm happy for that, because that's where I was getting at. Mm-hmm. Where you begin to act as though your spouse is a child, as though your spouse is not an equal partner. So you are trying to make them do something they don't want to do. That is not going to be a good marriage. And no matter mm-hmm. how you rationalize your behavior, it is not going to result in an improved relationship.
Right. Pastor Greene Adams, sorry, I saw you.
Yes, and therefore, I just noticed. When I was looking over the notes, that's the grieving part comes in. The grieving part comes in. You have to grieve over the fact that, I can't really do this now. I can't force the person. I can't demand. So grieve through that process. It may cause you some grief that you're not getting the kind of because control comes along with power. Isn't just control alone, but power comes along with it. So grieve through the idea that, yes, this thing is not happening as I would want it. That's a personal experience that I have to take. Then it is better I do that than to do those things that you have suggested. Okay, I'm going to wet up the clothes, I'm going to hide your shoes, I'm going to do whatever. It is better you internalize that feeling, grieve through that moment. But if you try physical means to control your spouse, as Dr. Greene says, you're going up a wrong road, and you're creating a relationship where you're now bordering on abuse. And that is not what you want. That has no part in any relationship, Christian marriage or not. That has no part whatsoever. I think it is a better road. Yeah.
Sometimes we are so resistant to the attempt for our spouse to control us that we may recognize that what they're doing is the right thing, but we just don't want to give in. And if I may share a personal experience I had many years ago, I remember an individual coming to me and saying, listen, every Sabbath morning, I get angry and my Sabbaths are not good anymore because my spouse will not go to church. And this individual was saying, listen, I prepare their clothes on Friday, and we're supposed to be good Christians. And Sabbath mornings, he won't get up to come to church, and I'm arguing with him, and I leave to go to church angry. And I suggested to her, I said, how about if you don't prepare his clothes anymore to go to church? How about if you just leave him, and when you're leaving to go to church, say, bye, honey, see you later when I come home, and get home from church and be a really nice spouse. And she was shocked. She said, Pastor Greene, you're advising me to do that? And I said to her, try it for 3 weeks and see what happens, and then come back to me. And the third week she called me and she said, Pastor Greene, you know what happened? My husband came to church today. I did as you said, and when I was leaving for church, he jumped up and he said, what happened? You invited me to church? And he got dressed and he came. So sometimes people resist the push. And when you realize that, hey, my spouse is not doing that anymore, then you say, let me do the right thing.
That's right. I think, Pastor Adams, you transition so beautifully into that point of grief, because that was actually our next point. And, it's interesting. And I like the way that, Claude and Townsend say it. They say that when you allow your spouse freedom, you will often feel loss and sadness about losing what you desired from him or from her. And, that is such an important point, because you have to allow yourself to experience that loss. I mean, it's a loss of your own feeling because you wanted something in particular. Your spouse wasn't willing to give that. And so, you deem it as a loss, but attempting to control them. I share a similar experience with Pastor Dr. Greene, maybe not with similar ending, but I remember one couple, the husband wasn't going to church. He would always complain that he didn't have shoes to go to church. And so, of course, the wife then wanted him to go to church, went and bought a nice pair of shoes for him and placed them there. And on the Sabbath morning, she anticipated and expected that he would be ready to go to church. Lo and behold, he was not ready to go to church. And so she recognized it, she internalized it. And in the week later, I think on a day, he chose to put on the shoes to go somewhere else. And she said, you cannot wear those shoes anywhere else. Those are church shoes.
Yes.
You know, she was unwilling to internalize her loss, to accept it, to grieve over it. I mean, she bought the shoes for her husband. They now belong to her husband, right? But she determined that he would not wear those shoes anyway. I think it ended with them having a verbal argument and the shoes being tossed somewhere else.
I mean, before you got to later in the week, I was thinking, well, she's doing a pretty good job at grieving, you know?
Right.
And the point of grieving internally is good, because when you lose someone, when you lose a spouse, a loved one, a mother, a father, brother, or sister, you work with it until you get to the point where you reach acceptance and you're able to move on.
Right.
If I realize that my spouse's behavior is not what I desire, and earlier I said that a desire to see change and seeking to make change happen by control are not one and the same. Right. So I may desire my spouse to do something that I think would benefit the relationship and benefit my spouse. But when I realize I can't make my spouse do it, and I can, and my spouse may come outright and say, I am not going to do that, then I may grieve about it. I may pray about it. I may ask God to give me wisdom to be a better spouse. And maybe in my living and accepting who my spouse is may cause my spouse to get to the point where she realizes that, listen, this is going to be good. And we see this all the time. We see that when we get to the point of acceptance and we begin to be kind and genuine in spite of our spouse's behavior.
And show unconditional love.
That our spouses come and meet us halfway. And so that's the point we're making here, where you get to recognizing that we're not suggesting that the situation may never change.
Right.
But if you try to take a hold and use methods that are not good, not appropriate, then it's not going to turn out for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, we have just a few seconds to wrap up. The time has gone again, as you know.
So
and so we're going to have to wrap it up. Dr. Greene, you kind of summarized for us. I'm just going to give Pastor Adams an opportunity to say a brief word, and then we're going to bring it to a close. So very briefly, Pastor Adams.
I was just going to add to what Dr. Greene was saying. Continue with he said kindness and all that, but I say show the love, unconditional love, because I have known of situations where unconditional love was able to bring about that change. Person became a member of the church and all, and started worshiping, but this was a case where the spouse was not a believer. But this good Christian lady not only showed kindness and compassion, but unconditional love, and that is what broke him.
Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another exciting edition of Marriage Encounter. We would like you to communicate with us. You can write us at marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. And we have always been and continue to be so excited to share with you as we continue our discussion on boundaries. And so until next time, same place, we wish you all the very best. Enjoy your time, focus, share with others. Let them know Marriage Encounter is on when we are on. We wish you all the best. Have a great day. God bless you.